Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about pensions. I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal and I want to address the pension problem that you probably know of that may make them break their promise to you. Get the pen and paper out. Hey everybody, Dominique Henderson, founder of DJH Capital Management, your YouTube CFP coming at you today. Want to talk about promises that are broken. You know, one of the coolest things was when you were a kid and your parents made you a promise and you knew they were going to fulfill on that promise and you didn't have to worry about anything. On the flip side though, when they broke their promise to you, man, it just made you feel the worst. But now life as an adult, you're probably pretty callous to people making promises and then breaking those or not keeping them. But could you imagine if your retirement life depended upon it, right? That would be a different story. Today we're going to break into some things that I think would be really interesting to you if you're headed towards that age of retirement or you're going to have some type of pension. Pensions are one of these, you know, let's call them prehistoric type of retirement vehicles that don't really pervade our landscape anymore. You got the 401k. But back in the day, a good old pension was what everybody looked at. Let's dig right into that. So you may be saying, Dominic, you're overreacting with this problem, but I don't think so. As of 2017, for every dollar that's owed to pensioners, there's only 73 cents available. So that's a pretty significant gap. And what we have to realize is that the only job of a pension manager is to make sure that when you go to the mailbox that your money's there. Let's back up before we get into my first point. How does a pension work? Well, back in the day, what used to happen is you would work for a company for 25, 30 years, whatever their policy is. And after that time, they'd probably take your 5 highest years of earnings, multiply that by how many years you worked, and then multiply that by some type of factor. That's a typical pension formula. That amount of money would then be paid out to you until you die or until maybe your wife dies. You know, there's different, joint survivor. There's all kind of certain life. There's all kinds of different annuities that come with pension. If you want to know about annuities, look at last week's episode. We'll link that up in the card. But here we go with pensions. The point is when you receive a pension, the expectation is that you're going to be able to rely on this promise of the company to pay that out until you die. And the problem is the only job of a pension manager or the person that manages those funds is to make sure that payment is there, like I said. And this gets into my first point. Traditional asset classes are not the same. So typically a pension manager would load up the portfolio with a bunch of fixed income because fixed income pays a certain fixed amount of dividends or coupon payments or interest payments to the owner of that particular fixed income instrument. And that is a very reliable source of income for pensions. Here's the problem. About 10 or 15 years ago, what we had is this inversion of how fixed income works, meaning that fixed income paid nice interest rates, but then the financial crisis came. And so banks, in order to stabilize the system, they went in and started buying a lot of fixed income that were, basically trash assets. And in this process, what you had is this inversion where fixed income prices went up and fixed income interest rates went down because they're inversely related. For more information on that, you can just Google that, how fixed income prices work. But here's the story. As fixed income interest rates and the payments that they kick off went down, pension fund managers were, struck with this problem of how do they fulfill the gap that was left from traditional asset returns in this particular asset class called fixed income. And this is where you have this big gap that has evolved over the last 10 to 15 years with, for every dollar being owed, there's only 73 cents worth of payouts for pensions at this point. So in this scheme of what they call asset liability matching, where you need to have as many assets for pensions, this is where the struggle comes. And in the article that I read about CalPERS, which is a huge pension on the West Coast in California, they're struggling with trying to find investment strategies that will help fill or close the gap for the pensions that they owe. Okay, since traditional asset classes are not the same, specifically fixed income, let's talk about what happens, because the other traditional asset class of stocks, This is the other problem. Everybody is buying stocks. Well, let's talk about the big macro picture, right? The 30,000 foot view, because I want to tell you how it works. You may just be thinking, well, everybody buys stocks and everybody has always bought stocks, Dominique. But in 1974, ERISA law was passed. And what did that do? Well, it brought on the age of the 401k. You see, company managers are not as dumb as we think they are. When they saw that these pensions were getting out of control and that they were going to continue to have to owe money to people that worked, let's say 25 years and then lived 40 years and they still paid them a salary as if they worked, they were like, we need to shift this thing around. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they went to go to Congress and they said, we need to pass a law so that our companies can be a little bit more profitable. Make sure you check out my blog article because I got a little salaciousness in there that you'll probably want to read through. But here's the point. As companies started to move from the industrial age to the age of technology, and they realized the cost of labor got higher, they could no longer afford to pay out these pensions. And worse yet, pensions on your balance sheet are liabilities. And it makes the company look worse from a stockholder standpoint. So here's the age of the 401k. It removes the pension as a liability off the balance sheet and gives the employee another alternative to invest into their retirement. Now, here's the point with that. When you go to a 401k, which is a defined contribution, versus a pension, which is a defined benefit plan, you put all the onus and all the responsibility on the employee to manage their retirement. And what you may have is people that have a lower level of financial literacy or a lower level of investment sophistication versus a pension fund manager that has been managing institutional money for years. And this is a little unfair. However, this is the way that things go. So you've basically taken an employee overnight and made them responsible for investing in their financial future. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem is when this transition first happened, you got a lot of people that were unsure about this and that had to get overnight education on what to do. And in most cases, they just checkbox the default choice of just picking stocks. This is why everybody piled into stocks, and stocks as an asset class has had really lower returns, traditionally speaking, over the last, let's say, 30 years than the 120 years of history. Combine that with the fact that you get your average employee that really doesn't have the time to research what stocks are in his 401k, let alone which ones he should be investing in. And what does he do? He hangs around the water cooler, he goes out for a couple of drinks on a happy hour, and he's hearing what his buddies are saying, and so he invests in that. And so you get this herd mentality into an asset class that drives down returns over time. And what you get is these same asset classes being bought by pension fund managers that are still trying to fulfill the gap of what they owe versus what is coming in. So, does set it and forget it really work? When do passive strategies fail? Well, for pension fund managers, they've been failing for quite some time right now. You can't just say we're going to go 80% fixed income and 20% stocks, or 50% stocks and 50% income, fixed income. You can't just do that. You're got to be a little bit more tactical in your approach, and I figure this is what CalPERS and a lot of the pension fund managers are figuring out now, that they've got to be a little bit more dynamic in their strategy choosing and strategy picking if they're going to close the gap between what they owe and what's actually coming in from a return standpoint. So what is the takeaway from this? I believe the takeaway is that promises can be broken and the rules will sometimes not always work. Monte Carlo simulations and all this kind of stuff, that's all great and fine. However, you're going to have a manager, or you're going to have to do it yourself, and you're going to have to be tactical in your approach. You're going to have to realize that there are different variables that happen in the market, sometimes things that are a little over your head or a little beyond your control. And you're going to have to get some perspective to allow you to make the right decision for you. You just can't always rely on promises because they can be broken. Now, this is just a taste of a blog article that I wrote called When the Pension Promise is Broken. It's about a 5 to 7 minute read on my website. I'll link it down below. Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, and we'll see you back next time. Bye-bye.